What's up guys, hope everyone is doing well. In this video I'm going to be going over some updates specifically for XYO, but before I get to the charts of XYO, I want to briefly update Bitcoin, say a few things in addition to the video I uploaded yesterday for Bitcoin, then go over the Bitcoin dominance and the total 3 chart just to give a general synopsis and preface for altcoins and alt season in the overarching, the grand scheme, the bigger picture of what may or may not be happening. Obviously, one of the first things I want to mention here with Ethereum recently setting a new all-time high. It very brief, just wicked up to a new all-time high. It's already being rejected. Obviously, now here looking at Bitcoin on the 4-hour, Bitcoin has been in a downtrend since reaching a new all-time high at around $124.5 thousand. At this point, with this correction here, it's bound about approximately 12%. But if we look here in this ascending uptrend zone that's been in place since the beginning of this kind of gradual, this kind of bunny hopping or stair-stepping price action in price discovery. Here we've seen this support line up in 3 major points. And what's very interesting is in yesterday's video I brought up this, we see this horizontal consolidation zone, then we saw the next stair step up to here. Now we're seeing another horizontal consolidation zone, which I think structurally is very similar to each other. We can see here that really this entire period leading into the low here is just pushing around 270 bars. This one here also leading into where the current low is also around 270 bars. So we could see a temporal confluence line up here, which is finding even more confluence of the fact that we see these 2 lows here, which would be synonymous to these 2 lows of most recent. Along with that, the second low here hitting the uptrend zone. Also, we see the 800 EMA here now leading into, again, uptrend zone. Second low here reaching in proximity to that 800 EMA. We're seeing a lot of things line up that are confluential in my view, where, I mean, like I said, really to kind of point out, we see these 2 peaks here, we see these 2 lows here, and we see 2 peaks here for Bitcoin, and now 2 lows coming back into the uptrend zone, getting close to 800 EMA. We're seeing the RSI here in the zone of the 272 to the 382, quite oversold at this point, sitting around 36. Could by all means go a tad bit lower. We could see some dips below the 272, closer to like 30, 28, maybe even lower, especially if we see a move down to the 800 EMA, maybe a tad bit lower to like 106, 105,000. I think it's definitely even possible to come down to somewhere around here, just around approximately 100,000. Now if we move here into this chart, it's also totally possible to see a retracement down in this ascending uptrend zone. This zone here has upheld the entire bull run since end of 2022, going into the beginning of 2023, when we saw Bitcoin move from around $15,000, $16,000 up to around $30,000 to $32,000. This white zone here has upheld this entire uptrend in this bull run for Bitcoin. So we could totally see a move down here, also in line with the 200 EMA, see Bitcoin come down to approximately $90,000. Now, if that happens, obviously the altcoin space, more likely than not, I think is not going to react too well unless we start to see, because Bitcoin dominance is dropping quite significantly, unless during this downside move for Bitcoin, we start to see a lot of inflows, the capital moving, rotating into altcoins, and we see them going up, and we do see one of these kind of, I suppose, relatively rare periods of time and occurrence where we see a decorrelation between Bitcoin's going down, altcoins are going up. So I think there's plenty of, it's a myriad here of different scenarios, and I'm trying to cover as many as I possibly can. But if we look at this 2-day chart for Bitcoin, one of the big things I went over in yesterday's video was we're seeing an ascending resistance here, seeing ascending support. We're seeing the direct opposite here on the RSI with a descending resistance and a descending support. So we're seeing bearish divergence now leading into here. If we look here, descending on the RSI, but ascending on the price, we're seeing a bearish divergence flip into hidden bullish divergence. And a lot of times when you see this happening, especially in an uptrend, despite that bearish divergence that I pointed out, you will see this hidden bullish divergence form, and it will continue to uplift and sustain a broader uptrend. Now we're also seeing the price is now finally coming back to the 200, or rather the 50 EMA and its band. This is something that I mentioned in over 2 weeks ago, the potential retest of the 50 EMA band due to the similarity between this consolidation and our current consolidation, and how the RSI in these periods look relatively similar. Now we're seeing the RSI below 50 at 48 at this point more. Last time it was this oversold was going back to April, late April, which when Bitcoin was somewhere around like $85,000, $86,000. So again, that's another good sign. We're seeing the price is still above 100,000, sitting on the 50 EMA band, around 111, 112,000 specifically, but yet we're seeing RSI reset itself to levels that weren't seen since around $85,000, $86,000. So that's generally a good sign. but it doesn't completely exclude the fact that we might see Bitcoin come down and test this uptrend zone along with the 200 EMA as well. And we'd like to see the RSI come down quite low, probably at least like 42 or lower, maybe even lower, down to 30, 38, 37. And if that happens, we see the RSI this low here, yet the price is still right here. That's going to be an amazing sign, because that's just, that's the hidden bullish divergence to a very a great degree. Seeing the price still basically just right at $100,000, give or take like $5,000, but yet the RSI is still oversold, reaching levels that it was back at approximately 50 to 55,000. That's clearly that's going to be a bullish sign in a bigger picture. So there's plenty of things obviously that could happen here with Bitcoin. I think they're all relatively equally likely. We might see a bounce here, might see a bounce lower. Really at this point, maintaining the 200 EMA here along with this uptrend zone is very crucial, so we don't see a move back down to this horizontal support around 75 to 77,000. If that does happen, likely we're going to see altcoins hit pretty hard unless they have a decorrelation period where we're really starting to see, let's say Bitcoin's topped out and we're starting to see the outflow of Bitcoin. We're seeing a rotation into altcoins, and we see Bitcoin's ending its bull run. We're seeing a probably relatively a pretty short period of where we see altcoins just go absolutely parabolic. Probably a short-lived alt season, but quite a good alt season if I had to imagine. So now moving here into Bitcoin dominance, we can see, as I've been going over, we get the macro descending resistance still in play, also being rejected along the 382, the inside ascending pitchfork channel. Seeing the more micro, the more recent uptrend here of the current, which now appears to be ending uptrend or bull run for Bitcoin dominance over the last 2.5, 3 years. RSI is continuing to stay below the horizontal support here. It's now recently moved below the median of the ascending channel, this inside pitchfork on the RSI. And you can see here with these instances here, here, and here, that every time we see specifically going, for example, here and here going below this, the median of this ascending channel, the last 2 times this happened was when the Bitcoin dominance was doing this and doing this here. So history is showing that we're potentially entering the period where we're about to see, a candle or two that just straight drops the dominance down to around 50% or lower. So again, this is, really we see the Bitcoin dominance shaping up also again with the fact that Ethereum is set a new all-time high recently. It looks like Ethereum's, even though it's seeing resistance and rejection recently, look, it's getting prepared to finally enter genuine price discovery upwards towards 5, 6, 7,000, maybe even higher. Perhaps upwards towards 15, 18, 20,000 over the next few months going into late 2025, maybe early 2026. Also, if we look here down at the RWA, we're finally seeing this uptrend going all the way back to August 2022 here. So over 3 years, or really right about at 3 years at this point, we're seeing this finally has been lost as well. Seeing the RSI go, or the RWI here rather, go below this horizontal level right here at around 43 will further solidify a movement. But we're seeing so many things, whether on the actual price here of the Bitcoin dominance or those derivative indicators, more notably suggesting in a more likely sense that we're seeing the Bitcoin dominance beginning to collapse here. It's about to enter that period that's, like, for example, synonymous to here, or something like this, or this, where we're going to see a number of candles that significantly reduce the dominance of Bitcoin within the overarching blockchain solution space or crypto space. And we're going to see things like Ethereum, Cardano, XY, and all these other altcoins exit their expansion periods, finally enter into that parabolic period that's associated with price discovery. And we'll start to see these periods of these borderline vertical, these face melting gains within alt season that have been, a long time awaited, delayed various times, where we see everything's looking good, then we see rejection. We've seen this overall bull run. Here looking at the total 3 chart, it's just we had this long-term slightly descending accumulation zone, and then we just see this gradual stair-stepping here, these relatively short-lived impulses towards the upside, where since December, end of 2024, so we're pushing a year at this point. We've just seen the total 3 basically just go sideways here. We saw this first rejection. We could potentially see another rejection here. Now, just to entertain as much as I can, it's totally possible, as some have been speculating, something I don't personally lean to, that we just don't really see in alt season. Maybe Bitcoin has topped out at 125,000 approximately. Maybe we have just seen Ethereum set pipsqueaked up to a new all-time high by a few $100s and it's already over. Maybe everything's over. There's no alt season. But to me, that personally just doesn't make sense when you look at the fundamental landscape. Bitcoin spot ETFs, there's Ethereum spot ETFs, there's more altcoin ETFs likely coming in the near future. We're seeing the initiative, Project Crypto, the SEC, this initiative to moving things that are off-chain, on-chain, like this, stock market assets, bonds, other forms of funds. We're starting to see this transition of, for example, like Web 2, like the old gen version of the internet, and kind of like these systems that harbor information, whether it's financial, economic data, or data in the sense of XYO, and geospatial location data, or to really just any kind of general data in general. We're starting to see this shift, especially associated with the adoption rate of Bitcoin and blockchain solutions, towards a more noteworthy integration of so within the real world and society at large, with the interest at BlackRock showing in tokenization. Obviously, as I've mentioned, this is something specific for XYO. We have seen the World Economic Forum project the DePIN space, which XYO is a DePIN, to around 3.5 trillion by 2028. Standard Chartered and Simpulse projected the RWA sector, which is DePIN is often so a subset of the RWA set or sector, and they have projected the RWA sector to reach upwards to 30.1 trillion by 2035. So again, really, I don't feel like it can be emphasized to really kind of take your mind and your, the forefront of your focus off of the technical charts and really focus on the fundamental landscape and the bigger picture here of like 5, 10 plus years down the road. We're at this kind of major inflection point of the adoption of blockchain solutions abroad and at large. That, right now, just seeing here, for example, the total 3 just move potentially upwards towards 3, 4, 5, maybe 8 to 10 trillion at highest in this current bull run is only just, it's a small drop in the pond compared to maybe 10 years down the road, and we're going to see, multiple tens of trillions of dollars of valuation in certain sectors, and obviously over the entirety of the market capitalization of crypto towards tens of trillions of dollars. And really, obviously, it's always great to, you want to realize your profits here in this run for the total 3 space, and obviously is going to include things like XY or whatever you may be invested in. You obviously want to profit, make gains there, not just round trip everything. But again, really, we can see here with this chart, we're sitting at prior all-time highs. It appears to be more likely than not that we're going to see a break above this towards price discovery. Again, the Bitcoin dominance here is just really continuing to suggest an alt season is within the next few months. But now here, really moving into XYO. If I go down to, before I get to the daily here, if we look at the 4-hour, I want to specifically point out the 800 EMA. And this is going to be kind of this violet or purple EMA, this estimated moving average here. Now, if I go all the way back to the beginning of the most recent bear run, we can see here, you can see this 800 EMA going down. The price was just had been suppressed by it the entire time until we got here, January 2023, when the bull run was beginning for Bitcoin and essentially everything else. Accumulation zone started here. We saw this move of XYO above the 800 EMA. Obviously here, it ultimately lost it, set a new low here, where we saw really kind of this major double bottom zone as kind of accumulation period, where you would have been buying at the lowest lows of XYO during the prior bear market. And here we saw, again, the first yellow vector printed at after, 70% correction. We then saw the battle against the 800 EMA 1 right here. We saw XYO move up to $0.015 here. And we saw just a rinsing and repeating. XYO comes back down to the 800 EMA here, intertwines along with it. It's battling it, loses it for a period of time leading into September, October, November of 2024. Finally wins that battle. Again, we see more yellow vector candles printed here after 70% correction and shoots up to 4.5 cents. Again, we're just rinsing and repeating. Comes back down to the 800 EMA. Finds support. Here gets rejected at 2 cents, which is why 2 cents here is going to be a major level once we start to see the price of XYO move higher here. We see the price come back down below the 800 EMA, struggling to get above it, gets above it for a brief period of time here. Again, it's just generally struggling to get above it now, leading into where we are currently with XYO. We're seeing all these EMAs really within the same range of just basically a proximity zone around a penny. Penny is technically important for XYO, and it's also psychologically an important value, just a nice whole penny. And to me, this is indicating that also on top of this kind of triangular like consolidation period here that we're seeing pressure being built up. Now the question is whether or not it's going to release towards the upside or to the downside. Maybe we see a brief fake out here, then we see it pick up, especially if Bitcoin continues to go lower towards 100,000, 95, 90,000 approximately. I think more likely than not we'll see XYO perhaps have some sort of fake out here towards the downside. If we look here at the RSI, we can see that it's quite oversold, sitting around 38 below 272. Still has room to go lower. But I mean, at this point, if I move here to the daily, we can see here just a better view of, we got this uptrend since August of 2024. Again, we see our vector zones here that have been very important in upholding price. Here is going to be the broad vector zone most recently. So what I've been saying is buying anything right here within this consolidated period historically for not only the vector candle context, but other contexts as well in terms of analyzing the technical charts appears to be a pretty good area to buy. On top of that, we've yet to see since December 2024 coming down from 4.5 cents. XY has not gone above the 6.8 level of the RSI. Every time we've seen this happen, for example, here, associated with going up to 4.5 cents. And then even going back a bit further, we can see right here, as we saw XY then move up to penny and a half. Whenever we begin to see that, history shows that likely we see the the RSI here moving up above 618. Probably going to be correlated with seeing XYO's price go back up towards 2 cents. More than likely than not, probably sit here in some form of fashion, then continue to go higher towards 4, 3, 3.5 cents, 4 cents, 4.5 cents, and then continue to go higher in the best case scenario. But I think that it needs to be kept on the mind of a current or of a potential deviation here of this uptrend and further uptrends I'll get to on the higher time frames, where we might see, especially if Bitcoin continues to go lower here towards those, approximately 90,000 at lowest. We could potentially see XYO come down to this vector zone here, or it could retest this horizontal zone here of around 007, 008, but it's definitely potential to come down to around 006 in this vector zone here. Now, if I move to the weekly chart, that zone here gets created. I mean, really the next zone of support using this weekly chart is going to be somewhere around this zone right here. So anywhere from around, again, kind of retesting around 007 right here, 006, or even potentially as low as 005, depending upon how low Bitcoin goes. Now, if I go back to Bitcoin here quickly, like I said, worst case scenario, we come down and retest this horizontal zone. We see something like this and Bitcoin manages to recover to go even higher. That is literally the worst scenario here possible. If Bitcoin loses this horizontal level, I will more likely than not start to shift to the fact that Bitcoin is in its bull run. Because that would then initiate this double top pattern here, likely losing this neckline and then initiating a drop that would be over 40, 43%, which is typically when you see Bitcoin start to do that, that's when the bear run is beginning in its all-time history in analyzing those percentage drops. So if something like that happens and we see Bitcoin retesting around 75, 77K, doesn't bounce there and continues to go lower, that's going to be correlated with XYO probably coming down to this level and even lower, which would just spell total chaos. Likely that might even mean we don't see any alt season at all. Again, I don't think that's most likely, more likely than not, but it is clearly a potential that sits on the table of the myriad scenarios that could unfold over in the near future. If we look down here at the RSI, it's still within the general support zone, just some sort of proximity to 272, still room for the RSI to go lower, which means the price could go lower. But as of right now, we're seeing each of these trends here, whether it's candle close support or wick support. Right now, they are currently holding. They're being tested, and the resolve is going to be shown over the next week to two. Going into September, like I mentioned in the last video, we've seen the golden cross. Typically, a lot of times when you see a golden cross, it's not always a guaranteed signal. A lot of times it's a false signal, but a lot of the times it is quite a bullish signal, and often you will see a stagnation for a period of time after the golden cross, and that's exactly what we've been seeing for XYO, which again may or may not culminate in a move back up to this this candle close resistance that's finding confluence around 2 cents. So we, best case scenario, we see a bounce here, move up to around 2 cents, maybe sit here for a while, then move up to the green zone, retesting prior all-time highs at around 7, 8 cents, then moving up here into this ascending resistance zone here, upwards towards 15, 20, 21 cents, maybe even higher, just obviously depending upon how it specifically plays out. I mean, we could very well see a, support here and then a move that takes it all the way up to maybe 30 to 40 cents, maybe 50 cents with some wicks, and then we see a retracement down back down near to the prior all-time highs, maybe like 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 cents or so. Then see another bounce further to higher targets leading into this chart, which, might be upwards here around 50 cents, $2, $2.30. But on this chart, we'll see XY here on the top, Bitcoin here on the bottom. We'll see here with 1, 2, 3, 4, comparing the peaks here of XY to Bitcoin. We see this long-term over 5-year from March of 2020 here, long-term 5-year plus uptrend that's been held for XYO. So assuming this holds, we'll see a bounce here for XYO. Currently, it's sitting above the candle close resistance right here. Still needs to get above the wick resistance with some candle closes here. The best case scenario, we will see this uptrend here hold. That again doesn't completely exclude a major, or a minor deviation, especially if we see Bitcoin continue lower here of this. Maybe we'll retest this support, which was a resistance, now flipped into support here once again. Again, maybe moving back down to the horizontal level. And like I said, worst case scenario, somewhere like right around here, around 0.06, 0.07, 0.05 at lowest. But really, I mean, we can see here the correlation with Bitcoin has been very significant. Bitcoin bottomed out here and its uptrend has been upheld ever since then. We see XYO bottomed out at the same time here in September, October 2023, here in August, September 2024, also here in March of 2025. We see these peaks lining up here in April 2023, March, April 2024, November, December 2024. So we're seeing clearly, as I've at this point evidenced enough, a temporal correlation between XY and Bitcoin, also with Ethereum, Cardano, and the vast majority of the altcoin space. So I mean, it really just depends upon whether or not Bitcoin is going to correct all the way down to its uptrend support, 90, 95, maybe some licks 85, 88,000, and then bounce from there. Likely then seeing that deviation here of XYO, fake out of the 5-year plus uptrend support, and then can actually continue to move higher towards actual price discovery at some point. But we look here at the 2-week chart, we'll also notice the support still being held in the 786 to 618 zone. If we do see a deviation here, further drop to the downside towards like 0.006, 0.005, like I said, that would come down right down to the bottom of this inside Pitchfork. Could still find a bounce there again to further highs, as I've mentioned. Really the biggest indicator for this 2-week chart that I've been going over here, the ASO, these convergent symmetrical triangles. Again, history is showing here that every time we see XYO here in the support zone, it's been a great time to buy, going all the way back to late, basically just Q4 of 2019. We saw it back here for each of these lows here, leading into September 2023, then in August of 2024, and now currently we're seeing again a range of around March to now currently August of 2025. And again, this is a 5+ year historical data point that is suggesting, obviously so if it is upheld, that right now in this sideways consolidation period is the point to be accumulating buying before we see a reversal back up to higher highs, which would likely coincide with seeing a retest of the prior all-time highs and actual price discovery begin, specifically for XYO in the broader altcoin market. Now that's also going to be significantly dependent upon seeing the RBI move up here higher, see a break above the Bollinger Bands, and actually come up to the value of 60 and break above it, just as what happened back here, as we saw XYO during this parabolic portion, during the last bull run. The MACD here is, again, it's still sitting at a horizontal support level. As of right now, that's a good sign unless it breaks below it over the next few weeks, which, again, like I said, is definitely possible. Stoch RSI, similar situation, still kind of in a broad support horizontal zone. See the uptrend of the RSI here, which is, borderline synonymous with the trend and the pattern I pointed out on the ASO. Right now, again, we're just seeing another, multi-year time span of denoted points of support on not only these derivative indicators, but as well the price being in a crucial zone of the 786 to 618, which has been support for the entirety of this expansion phase here from September 2023 leading into now August of 2025. which very well could be, we're right in those earliest moments where we're being, all this information, this data, technically and fundamentally speaking. Obviously, we think about the upcoming launch of XYO Layer 1. It's supposed to be in Q3, so before September. Who knows if that, it's not guaranteed. The team has obviously said that it will. Best case scenario, it does launch, so there's no negative, feedback, no accusations that they're, manipulating people or they just don't keep up their word, so on and so forth. So, obviously, best case scenario, we're seeing kind of this perfect storm, I believe, brewing, where, as I mentioned, Ethereum setting a new all-time high, Bitcoin dominance is continuing to plummet. The total 3 chart is sitting at prior all-time highs, more likely than not, I believe, going to break to price discovery. Bitcoin, assuming that it continues to go higher, 250K and higher, because no on-chain, nearly none of them have been, of those indicators on-chain have signaled an all-time high for Bitcoin. And the same thing goes for a lot of the technical indicators, such as the RSI, the RVI, and the open interest money flow index indicator. Borderline nothing, basically nothing, has indicated, even the Pi cycle top, nothing has indicated Bitcoin is topped out yet. And when you think about the fundamental landscape we're in, why would, if we're in a time period where we're going to see all of these historical indicators break down and break in a negative sense, in direct correspondence to the fundamental landscape looking better than it has ever been, these seem to be, to me, mutually exclusive points of information. It doesn't seem to me that a unbelievably basically immaculate fundamental landscape is going to coincide in tandem with all of these historical top indicators breaking in a negative sense, to where they're not, we've seen a lackluster bull run for Bitcoin. Alt season really hasn't even began in the parabolic sense. And if everything is over right now, then again, it just seems mutually, I just don't see why we would see no alt season, lackluster bull run for Bitcoin, coinciding with an immaculate, basically, just an ever-growing fundamental landscape. And so, but here specifically for XYO, with the upcoming launch of Layer 1 and the staking mechanism, one of the things I've brought up for XYO is it's taking the fact that we see Bitcoin go to like 200,000, upwards to 250,000 at highest, with the current circulating supply of around 13.5 billion, XYO could go to like $34 to $36, and that would be matching the market capitalization of Bitcoin if it were to go to $200,000 to $250,000. So I don't think that's really reasonable to say. But let's cut that in half. $18, assuming XYO circulating supply is still about 13.5 billion, it'd be worth about half of Bitcoin's market cap at that point. Still think that's quite unreasonable. So to cut that in half, $9, which gives me the above the, for example, here on this chart, this is 50 cents to $2.30, maybe pushing upwards of $3, $5, $8 to $10 is reasonable, with the circulating supply of XYO staying basically the same that it is right now. But if you think about the staking functionality that's coming up, if this happens to coincide with the hotbed parabolic portion of an upcoming alt season, Bitcoin's going buck wild, Ethereum's pushing 5, 8, 10,000 plus dollars, Cardano, everything else is just going crazy. On top of the fact that Layer 1's just launched, a lot of the XYO is being staked up, locked up, the circulating supply is being reduced. We could potentially be in the early moments leading into we're brewing a perfect storm right now for price appreciation for XYO. And if, let's say, as it's been said, like Marcus Levin, various other representatives of the XYO team have said that they believe a significant portion of the circulating supply of XYO will be locked up. Even if it just gets cut by a fourth or a third, let's say it pushes getting cut by half. Seeing that, that would create a fantastic environment. It would cultivate a fantastic environment for it to actually see XYO push $3, $5, $8, maybe $10, maybe even higher than that. And that would make even going to $20 to $30 even more likely for XYO, because its circulating supply has been cut by some fraction, and it's no longer going to be worth as much. Even if it goes to $5 and the circulating supply stays at approximately 13.5 billion, it's only going to be worth approximately 70 billion. It will still be generally under $100 billion. And in taking the fact that we see total 3 chart go to 3, 5, maybe trillion dollars or even higher, that's really, to me, it doesn't seem outlandishly absurd. I've had people say that $2, $2.30 seems absurd. Perhaps it is. But really, if you think about it in the broader context, the technical data, XYO structurally here looks great in my opinion. Fundamental landscape, never been better. XYO layer 1's coming up with a staking mechanism. Again, I just really can't overemphasize it. It seems like a perfect storm is brewing here. So, I mean, I might just be here in the near future as time goes on. This, this first target of around 8 cents to 28 cents or so, second target of around 50 cents to $2.30 might be completely blown out of the water and might in the near future be proven as a absurdly conservative price projection because of all of these fantastic things lining up technically and fundamentally for XYO specifically. Now, moving here to the comparison chart of Bitcoin, obviously here, Ethereum, Cardano, XYO, gone over this plenty of times. This generally is just conveying with each of these color coordinated zones. We saw Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano bottom out in late 2018, early 2019, leading into the March crash in purple. The peak of Bitcoin at 64K, which is really the structural peak, especially if you look at on-chain data. We saw, Bitcoin 64K. Ethereum's basically already topped out. Same thing for Cardano. We had the minor move to 69K for Bitcoin. Ethereum did something similar. Same thing for Cardano. These three looked very much so basically the same, whereas XY was in a more notable lag. By the time it was really at the end of its first move, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano basically had already topped out. And when Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano just made those minor moves basically in a horizontal distribution phase, we saw XYO make significantly more upwards poised, higher sloped gains towards the upside, moving from, let's see here, 0.007 all the way up to 8 cents. I mean, that was quite a large move. I mean, percentages, we're looking here, XYO moved another 1,000%, while we saw Cardano move about 200%, Ethereum move about, again, another 150%, and Bitcoin basically just stayed stagnant. So, I mean, we could see something similar to that, where we're going to see XYO again have quite a significant notable lag behind Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano, which means if Bitcoin tops out in like October, November, December, we're probably going to see XYO top out probably sometime Q1 of 2026. But because XY is becoming more mature, it's about to become its own layer 1. Again, we got the staking mechanism, the projections of the World Economic Forum for DePIN, Standard Chartered and Simples for RWA sector, all this perfect storm, all these confluential factors that I'm pointing out technically and fundamentally could bring XYO to a maturity state that is more akin to something like Cardano or Ethereum, where we'll see XYO have a tighter correlation with Bitcoin in time, meaning that if we do see Bitcoin top out sometime in Q4, we'll see XYO top out maybe a few weeks or so, a month or so after Bitcoin tops out, and it will be closer to Bitcoin than it was during the last bull run. As you can see here, leading into this pink period, we saw the brunt of the bear run for XYO, Cardano, Ethereum, Bitcoin. Here in the purple periwinkle period, we saw the kind of leading into that first low, second low of the bear run, entering really the accumulation period. Then we really started the bull run. If you look here at Bitcoin, this is when the bull run started. We then saw Ethereum pick up during these same periods of time. Now afterwards here, Ethereum got really wonky leading into this green period, but if you look here at Cardano, and same thing for XY, you can see that those, again, we're seeing all of these upswings line up with Bitcoin. We're seeing the downswings also line up with Bitcoin. And generally, again, this temporal pattern, this trend confluence, I think is very important and something that will continue to generally be a trend going into the near future. But really, just to kind of end the video, if I were to give any form of advice, as we're reaching potentially these endpoints, this final parabolic portion of Bitcoin's bull run, its final thrust to the upside, altcoin season actually beginning its mind melting period where the gains are just 10, 20, 30x, maybe even higher for a lot of these altcoins. Something to keep on the mind as an investor in XYO or whatever you're in is to realize that you need to have an exit plan prepared, some sort of scaling out strategy. Here for XYO, once we start to reach price discovery, you might want to think about selling a portion of what you bought to realize some profits. Maybe it'll correct, and then you could put some more in if you want to, and then ride it back up if it goes higher, if you feel convicted that it will go higher. Just in case, like for example, let's say if we see XYO here move up to, like let's say 15, 20 cents, something like this, and this ends up being its top, and you're sitting here thinking, oh, it's going to go higher, and it never goes higher, and then you end up round tripping your portfolio again. You just stressed out emotionally, psychologically driven through the mud because you're round tripping things again. And that also may end up trickling into the next bull run where you end up repeating that behavior. A lot of people, buying throughout the bear run here, leading into the expansion phase here, have been so familiarized and acquainted with hitting that buy button that you almost maybe don't even know really where the sell button is. You haven't even hit the sell button once. And so, you want to familiarize yourself with actually selling at some point in time when the gains are starting to please you, and also just understand that it's not going to be in your benefit to become greedy and develop a kind of a parasitic negative relationship with that greed, thinking that it's going to go higher and not selling anything because you want more money because you're being greedy. And lastly, something I've mentioned on XYO plenty of times is it's an unbelievably wicky asset. For example, if you look here, here, really here, and we'll move up to 4.5 cents. If you really want to maximize your profit taking and try to get as close to the ideal as you can, you got to realize that XYO is a very wicky asset. And if you want to sell as close as you possibly can to its peaks, oftentimes it's associated with these short-lived wicks, which means that, let's say that XYO moves all the way up to the top of this channel, close to $1. If it tops out somewhere around $1, that's going to be in a wick, which means that final move that you need to sell in as it's hitting $1 might be within a specific week. An even smaller time frame within that week, it's wicked up within a 2-day time period. But within, even again, zooming into that 2-day time period, there was 1 day out of those 2 days, and it was 2 to 4 hours out of that 1 day of those 2 days that you needed to sell in order to maximize that profit in that short-lived wick. So it's very easy to buy and to accumulate through longer, medium-term to longer-term period of time. But whenever it gets down to the point of actually hitting that sell button, scaling out, it's going to be a very split-second, split moment, small window of time that you need to make up your mind and feel convicted in selling a portion of your position or all of your position, so as to actually realize profits and not continue to screw yourself over by relating too much to greed and just continuing to round trip your portfolio and never actually realizing profit of your investments. But as I said, that was the last thing that I wanted to talk about and go over in this video. So as always, I hope you all enjoyed. Again, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Ooh, I regret now, won't I see you forever, such a